Hello everybody, we wanted to do a quick screen scribble about discovering and changing our inner world. We're the Chris's, and we figured out that we were plural back in 1986. Our first head map that we'll be talking about was made in something like March or April of 1986, and it has made quite a number of changes, but we wanted to talk about the topography and how those changes took place over time. So we're going to be covering 30 some odd years of shifts and changes, but we're going to make this a fairly quick video, hopefully. Our first head map was relatively simple, with basically a line describing our inner versus outer world. And out here it said outside. And pardon me while I'm searching for tools here. There was a little break in the wall between the inside and the outside with a curtain describing where front was. There was also these little sections on both sides of that wall. One of them was video equipment. So, like almost inside of the wall between the inside and the outside world, we perceived our video equipment over on the left looking out, and our audio equipment on the right looking out, which is kind of important because those move as things evolve. And then this main area here was the front room. We didn't label it, but that's what we call it now. So it's the front room. And that helps you kind of understand how things start evolving as they evolve. And then there's like some chambers off on the sides or behind the front room. There was somebody's private room back here. So there's like hallways off to the left and the right. This hallway we just have going off into the distance. Like we didn't know what was down that hallway. And so, yeah, it's kind of weird. Anyway, so this was the white room. There was another private room. And I don't know, it's something like this anyway. Close enough. Okay, so behind the front room, there's a door. And that's a door. There's a little room in here where the person we thought was the host was in here, or had a room there. And back here was just memory. We didn't describe what this room is. I don't know why. There's a door here. And back here just said chamber of memory, scream, and stuff. And like we couldn't access memory very well. And and this room here just continued on to the chamber here, this wall. But anyway, so you get the basic idea, because some of these structures are still there today. They're just not in the same place. And that's why it's important to kind of draw these out, because they moved. Not that we had a host, but that was like called Chris's room. Anyway, so you get kind of the idea of there was basically, and there was one piece of furniture at the time we actually drew this, and that was the bench. Whatever. So that's the bench there. And that bench is still there to this day, actually not in the same place. We've moved it around a bit, but it is still in the front room. So, one interesting thing is as our inner world evolved, we just changed things. We didn't remove them. So that's kind of important to know. I think, so here's how some of the things changed. So we needed a meeting room. So over here, this weird hallway that went to nowhere ended up changing to an archway and an extra room. And that became the meeting room. Still there to this day, it's just moved. And then, what else has happened? That was one of our first changes, actually, was adding the meeting room. We had a big round table in there. Actually, I think eventually the archway ended up over there. Actually, there was a door here, so this became a door. And then there was an archway here where Ruth could stick her head in the room. Ruth is our dragon. So our dragon was able to, stick her head in there and participate in meetings by sticking her head into this archway on the side. So we actually added a room, but notice we didn't lose any rooms. Okay. Eventually, we ended up with more and more rooms, off down these hallways, more and more private rooms. And one of the other quick changes that happened not long after this map, the first map was made, was that the audio equipment and video equipment ended up getting moved. So then we had a control panel. And over here, instead of video equipment, and I'll erase those in a moment, we ended up with a window. How do I depict the window? So instead of us having amnesias, now people in the front room could look out this window, and we lose the video equipment and we lose the audio equipment, and now everything is kind of set up on a a broadcast system, so that folk in the front room can participate. Note, person who is front is usually here, looking outward. I should have done that in another color. I will undo, and then I can do it in a different color. Here we go. So this is usually where the person who's fronting is, and they're usually facing outward. And this may be weird, but the map is basically this barren, except that I'm not drawing in the meeting table with all the chairs around it in here. And eventually we added pillows over here. But really at this point, this is probably still 1986. It's pretty barren in here. So we have the control panel, the window, the bench, which may have been moved by then. So I'll erase the words front room so that we can be a little more exact. So the bench probably moved to here. So it was a little closer to what was going on in front or the window. Yeah. And there was still this weird back room. I think that really is the back room. So we're going to call it the back room. Yeah. This is still probably 1986. So as our system grew and got larger and larger, we had to get more elaborate. And you'll see eventually what happened is we have the front, let's say front here, and we have this the window. We have the control panel. But what happens eventually is we end up with this big circle. And off on the side here would be the meeting room with the table. And then we have a bunch of alcoves and different places where all of our, if I get rid of that menu, I can do that. Okay. Where all of our various subsystems have their spaces, however many of them there are, something like that. So this is still the front room. And this is still the meeting room. And Almarissa's thing, the white room, is somewhere like here. And the back room, memory chamber, the Christinas are somewhere over here. So their private room moved also. Memory chamber, yeah, okay. So we got the control panel, we have the bench. By now, Almarissa has a desk over here. Ruth is generally hanging out in the middle because Ruth is really large. And all the things. So we really just pushed this wall back. Instead of it being squared or rectangular like in the other map, we just flushed out this space and pushed all of the rooms and the walls back and moved them around. And we eventually ended up with this kind of semicircular thing. Still at this point considering it an apartment, but then this is how it became the spaceship. So the spaceship ended up with this front area here being the bridge. And Ruth being here, and we added a mountain. Yes, I stink. Where is... I guess Almarissa's desk is in somewhere in here probably now. So the desk was moved. Ruth's back there. Now Carpenter is there. There's like all of these different subsystem rooms, but they're like rooms off of a balcony kind of thing that's surrounding the mountain in the middle. And this is the bridge. Now, it is technically the front room, but it is now the bridge. And the front, instead of there being, if you've ever seen any of Frank's comics, Frank has, sometimes has a chair in front and somebody sitting in the chair. So instead of the task chair, now there's like the captain's chair. And the control panel, like, is now kind of like that bridge console in Star Trek. Yeah, and then, you know, the bench and the cushions, like, all that stuff is still there. We still have a bunch of other things in there. Oh, and at some point we added a projector screen over here, so we can, like, play internal movies or whatever, and so on. This area here is open to the atrium. I don't know how to depict these things. This is why we don't draw inner world diagrams much. But anyway, so it's almost like the front room got squished up, or the items in it. It's not really squished because this is so much larger, actually. So the front room is up here, and an extension of it is out here. Here's another flex room, similar to the meeting room. That's where the kitchen is. The test kitchen. I can't spell either. So that's the test kitchen. And the teenagers are over there and stuff like that. Yeah. So hopefully this helps. It's gotten... Okay, this section, like the bridge, the spaceship section, is pretty stark. It's like gray metal. It's very Star Trek. It's very clean, like sci-fi, brushed metal kind of, or gray look. And then there's the mountain. The mountain is a mountain with trees and things like that. In fact, Alias's tree is here. And so she's a dryad. She actually had, at some point, realized that her tree had to be in our system with her, and her tree showed up. It's very silly how these things happen. Some of them is by, like, realizations and some by intention. But the intention to change our apartment to this larger model with all the side rooms was very intentional. And then the idea that really didn't work as a house or an apartment anymore was probably 2018 when we changed it into a spaceship. I think that was when we changed it into a spaceship. And it's pretty much been the same since. The trees are getting bigger and stuff. People are like, yeah, but the new mountain, now is like more vegetative and stuff. It's taken a while. So this is kind of a necessity is the mother of invention type of thing. So eventually it was like, oh, this is much too big. So how are we going to actually like traverse these distances? I mean, there's a whole mountain in the middle of this spaceship, right? How do we traverse these distances? So along the balcony, I'll use another color. So now there's like a tram system running around here and drawing it. Like, we've been wanting to do some artwork and show it, but it's just like, how do we do this? Perspective and blah. And how do we put this monorail across this balcony? And it just gets too complicated and we're like, I don't know, forget it. So we have this monorail that can take people, like, you can basically leave the bridge and just go on the monorail and go around and get places really quick. And, of course, some people have magic and just can, like, blip places. But we wanted it believable for those of us who don't do magic. Yeah. But anyway, it's still, we wonder why we haven't, like, painted the walls or put up murals or anything, but we're not into, like, decorating, I guess. And what started out in the beginning is basically a blank room, and then we realized there were features. Like, it took a while to realize, oh, it's not just a room with oh, that's right, we forgot the file cabinet, and the file cabinet's still around, too. But we had a room with a file cabinet, that first room. In fact, we didn't draw the file cabinet in the room, but we eventually realized the file cabinet was there. Anyway, so the room with the file cabinet, which was our head, eventually evolved more and more from that room to an apartment to what must have been some kind of weird house. And then eventually we just pushed the walls way back further and made a lot more room and made it into a spaceship. So, how we made it into a spaceship, let me open up another document for that. All right. So, we drew diagrams first. We had some ideas for how to do it. So we did let's say kind of a front elevation of our spaceship, kind of something like this. So we did a front elevation of our spaceship. It's a little bit better than that, but something like that. And we did a side view. Let's see if I can start it from here. Quickie sketch stuff. Something like that. Some kind of weird Star Trek-y thing. Something like that. And so we drew these, and then we had the interior view, which is kind of flipped. So, yeah. So we've got the big center where this is the front, and then we have all the rooms coming off of it. And those rooms are larger on the inside than the outside. And you can see that's this, like, sticking out section is these rooms around the rim of the ship. And then that large bubble on top is Ruth's big mountain chamber. And then somewhere up here is front, like here is where front window stuff is. I don't know, somewhere around there. Anyway, you get the basic idea. So we drew all this out, and then we built a Millennium Falcon model, which we bought online, like a little $12 metal model thing, tiny thing. And we built it as part of the change from an apartment to a spaceship. So we did some as inside so outside stuff in addition to the sketches of our inner world and the actual spaceship sketches that you see here. And we all worked on the intention. Oh, it looks like it was 2019 we added some other stuff. February to March 2019. So we were making the preparations probably late 2018 and actually did the changes in 2019, it looks like, on this map that I'm looking at on paper over here. We added the hover transit system in May 2019. Oh, and we added the rec center and engagement to the map. A couple of extra rooms and areas to the map in 2020. Oh, 2021 reparenting center added. Oh, removed. Oh, I know what happened. February 2021, we had a problem, and the kids ended up traumatized and associated their trauma with our reparenting center. We had to remake it. Yeah. And we blame that on a TV show, so wasn't our fault. Should have read Does the Dog Die? So, yeah. So it takes time and intention to make changes in your inner world. Our inner world started out as more or less a blank slate, like just a room or a space in which we could interact with each other. So it was more about the interactions than the space, to make that clear. The space, it seems to be a representation of, I guess, mental activities or mental abilities or resources. So our map and the fact that it's a spaceship isn't as important as, say, the flexibility that it being a spaceship in our head, like, allows us. So it allows us conceptual flexibility that a house or an apartment wasn't giving us. Because a house stays in one place, an apartment stays in one place, and a spaceship moves around. So that made more sense to us eventually. And because, like, we're kind of like Star Trek geeks, even though we made a Millennium Falcon, don't ask. But we're Star Trek geeks and Star Wars geeks. But the idea is, like, the Enterprise has a crew of hundreds, if not thousands, and we wanted that type of space where an apartment or a house would start to feel really crowded and we kept having to change it. Once we made it into a spaceship, we could just scale it to the point where it's like, we can still make it bigger than this if we need to, but we have, like, overbuilt it so that the infrastructure is in place for many, many more Chris's to be active in our system. I'm assuming that whoever's there is there. If we discover 100 stowaways tomorrow, we would be able to leverage the space we've already built into our system to make accommodations for them and help them find housing and be able to onboard them and do orientation meetings and things like that. Like, we are already set up to process and onboard and welcome and set up a large contingent of newcomers with success. We haven't had that kind of an influx, but we wanted to be prepared for it just in case, if that makes any sense. And not to have that extra anxiety of, oh, but we're already so crowded. How will we ever manage if we discover so many people? We didn't want that. We didn't want that to be a reason or an excuse for anybody to hold back from joining us. So now those excuses, those reasons are off the table. If they have other reasons or needs or problems with joining us, that's different. But we didn't want that to be our problem. That was a part of their, let's say, objections that we could handle and take care of and hopefully eliminate that issue. We wanted to always be able to welcome people with no hesitation and with no reservations, not feeling like, oh, I'm going to have to give up my living room because, you know, we don't have enough space or whatever. Like, we don't have that now. We just be like, oh, cool. Somebody else, you know, we'll add a bedroom to Sector E, you know. It's like, oh, okay. Or, you know, Deck 5. So it's like we're already scaled for accommodating thousands at the moment. But we're only 150, whatever. 157, somebody says. That we know of. So, work in progress. So, anyway, this is the Chris's. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. Don't think you're going to find your inner world and it's already going to be some magical, elaborate landscape with hanging gardens and, I don't know, and wonderful things to explore and so on. If it happens that way, that's great, cool for you, but a lot of people have kind of blank slate inner worlds that are kind of awaiting like use, I guess, you know, waiting for us to actually notice them and work with them. And we didn't really change the quality of a lot of our walls. We moved where they were. Sometimes we changed a doorway to an archway. I'm trying to think if there was any other like real substantial changes. We've added intercoms, kind of have that like computer tell so-and-so in the laboratory such and such kind of thing going on. So we have like kind of an intercom system. Yeah, So hopefully this kind of thing is helpful for folk who are confused about what it means to change your inner world. We will draw diagrams, we will make models, we will sketch sketches and take out computer software if we need to, and so on, and start manipulating our sketches and drawings to plan out future changes and stuff like that. Yeah, that's it. Have a great day and take great care of yourselves.